Boston is not chasing noise at the deadline, it is circling leverage. And that is why the Jaren Jackson Jr. rumors matter far more than they look on the surface. While Memphis publicly insists on building around him, the league understands how fragile that stance becomes once internal timelines collide. When a franchise debates direction, even cornerstones quietly enter the conversation. Boston is not reacting to chaos. It is anticipating it. Jackson is not being evaluated as a box score solution. He represents control in playoff environments where spacing collapses and mistakes decide series. His value is not just blocks or points. It is the way he forces opponents to abandon Plan A. That type of impact travels deep into May and June. Here is the uncomfortable angle most people ignore. Consolidation is not always reckless. Sometimes it is protection. As trade rules tighten and flexibility becomes currency, locking elite impact into one roster spot can be smarter than spreading assets thin and hoping development cooperates. The money is loud, but the math is not naive. Boston has already shown it understands the second apron better than most front offices. This is not about ignoring penalties. It is about choosing where to absorb them and where to stay untouchable later. Memphis would demand more than names. They would demand certainty. Picks timed incorrectly lose power. Picks aligned with a stable contender become immediate leverage. Boston knows this, and that is why patience matters. Nothing here guarantees a deal, but the intent is the signal. Boston is thinking ahead of the market, not chasing it. If this door opens, it is because timing finally favors preparation, and if it closes, the message remains the same. This front office is not done shaping the future. This is the kind of rumor that forces the league to stop and recalibrate. Not because it is likely, but because it exposes how close Boston already is to controlling the next era of contention. A three-team framework that places Bam Adebayo in green is not fantasy roster bait. It is a stress test for how far the Celtics can push competitive dominance without breaking their identity. Adebayo is not being discussed as a savior. He is being examined as a stabilizer with star-level consequences. The real intrigue sits beneath the headline. Boston would not be chasing points or hype. It would be chasing connective power. A center who defends in space, survives playoff switches, and keeps the offense fluid without demanding hierarchy. That archetype is rare, and when it appears, it usually defines contenders for years. Critics point to his current numbers and hesitate. That hesitation is exactly why elite front offices stay aggressive. Production dips are often contextual, not terminal. A different ecosystem, a clearer offensive gravity, and a defined role can unlock value that box scores hide. There is also a strategic layer few are willing to confront. Consolidating assets now can be a form of protection later. As roster building becomes more restrictive and draft capital more volatile, locking in high-level versatility can reduce future exposure. Boston understands this better than most. Miami complicates everything. Pride, rivalry, and philosophy stand in the way. But markets shift fast when timelines crack. No stance is permanent once pressure builds. Whether this deal ever becomes real almost misses the point. The fact it can be modeled credibly tells you everything. Boston is operating from strength, not need. Every serious contender reaches a moment where bold ideas become plausible. This is one of those moments. Boston is not looking for a temporary fix at the deadline. It is searching for stability, disguised as upside. And that distinction changes everything about how this front-court conversation should be read. The discussion around a Horford replacement is not about finding the next version of him. That is impossible. It is about identifying a big who can survive playoff pressure without warping the Celtics' long-term flexibility. That is why names like Wendell Carter Jr. quietly matter more than louder options. Carter is not a splash move. He is a structural one, a center on a controlled contract who does not demand touches, who can absorb physical matchups, and who allows Boston to keep its offensive hierarchy intact. In an East where matchups swing series more than stars do, that profile carries hidden value. The real intrigue is not the player, it is the timing. Orlando just went all in elsewhere, which means every remaining decision becomes sharper. Depth suddenly costs more. Certainty becomes negotiable. Boston understands this pressure point, and that is why inquiries make sense, even if a deal feels unlikely today. There is also a bigger layer most people miss. Adding the right center now is not about this season alone. It is about insulating future seasons from panic spending when the cap tightens further. One disciplined move can eliminate two future problems before they exist. Boston does not need to win the deadline. It needs to leave it cleaner than it entered. That is where optimism lives. This front office is not reacting. It is sequencing. If a move happens, it will not look reckless. It will look boring to some and brilliant later. And if it does not, the signal is still clear. The Celtics are building optionality, not chasing headlines. That is how contenders stay contenders. Something shifted in Boston the moment those words were caught on camera. Not whispered, not staged, just raw. I am ready. And suddenly, the entire league had to rethink what it thought it knew about the Celtics' timeline. This season was supposed to be about survival, quiet nights, managed expectations, a bridge year wrapped in patience. Instead, Boston turned it into leverage. They won games they were not supposed to win. They built habits without their franchise pillar. They exposed how stable the foundation really is when pressure rises. That comeback against Miami mattered for reasons far deeper than the scoreboard. A team down at halftime did not panic. Rotation stayed sharp. Shot selection stayed disciplined. Defensive communication never cracked. That is not talent surviving chaos. That is structure asserting itself. When the game tightened, Boston did not look like a group waiting for rescue. It looked like a group rehearsing for something bigger. Then came the moment. Cameras roll, players celebrate, and Tatum says it. Calm, certain, ready. Here is where the conversation gets uncomfortable for the rest of the East. Boston is already winning without forcing the issue. That changes the calculus completely. Any return from Tatum becomes additive rather than desperate. There is no rush, no need to gamble health for relevance. The team has earned time. What makes this dangerous is not the idea of Tatum returning. It is the context he would return into. A roster that learned how to function without gravity being handed to it. A locker room that redistributed responsibility. A system that does not collapse when one star sits. That kind of environment historically extends careers and sharpens playoff execution. The front office sees it too. Every trade rumor now exists in a different light. Boston is not shopping out of fear. It is exploring out of strength. The difference matters. When contenders negotiate from stability, they dictate terms rather than react to them. The league will debate timelines, medical windows, precedent. All of that misses the larger point. Boston is no longer measuring success by whether Tatum comes back this week or next. They are measuring how unstoppable the roster becomes when he eventually does. That is why those two words landed so hard. Ready does not mean rushing. Ready means prepared. And Boston looks far more prepared than anyone wants to admit. The most unsettling part is this. The Celtics are already proving they belong. Tatum returning would not save their season. It would redefine it.